Okay, so a tough parallel question. It's number 14, so I think at this point in the section, it's likely that you could have a decently tough question, like at least a level 4 question, I think, potentially. And it's taking up half the page. So if you read this and the topic of even the stimulus throws you off, you can flag it, come back to it later, totally fine. You are reading a lot here to get the benefit of only 1 point. So this would definitely be a candidate for flagging in my book. Now, parallel process, of course, read the stimulus, try to extract a general principle in terms of a method of reasoning, and then see how you can map it onto the answer choices, even if, of course, things can be in a different order in the choices than they were in the stimulus. Now, I've talked about qualifiers and degrees of certainty in the conclusion yesterday, and here we may not have quite a qualifier, but we do have certainly a conclusion, and we do have a method of reasoning. What's the conclusion here?
Yeah, I mean, the conclusion is the hypothesis in the first sentence is wrong because, and it says that's true because that the thing that they're concluding, it requires itself over and over and over, and that because that's absurd, then the thing can't be true.
Yeah, awesome. So it's a multi-step argument. The conclusion is in line 4. However, this hypothesis cannot be correct. Since, meaning evidence, it would require this inner self, visually perceiving, which in turn requires something else, which leads to an infinite regress. So because an infinite regress is absurd, therefore the hypothesis cannot be correct. So it's really a whole series of things, and you don't necessarily need to know all of this, but I do think it's useful to have here. So it would require an inner self visually perceiving newly formed image. So inner self, which requires mental image. And you don't even really need to be that concerned with everything that follows. Just a bunch of details from the end of line 4 through the beginning of the final line. All of that is just details that's saying it requires all these things that keep continuing. Then infinite regress is absurd. Therefore, hypothesis false. So evidence, subconclusion, main conclusion. In this case, evidence was initially suggested by the word since. Then there aren't really any other clear indicator words here, but they do have this chain reaction going on, which at least gives you something. Now, we have 2 things that we can use here to our advantage. First is that we have the conclusion cannot be correct, which is, of course, strong, clear language. So you could match the answer choices just by using that framework of something being wrong, something being incorrect, something being false. All of those synonyms are perfectly fair game here. So A saying Indo-European cannot be, that matches. B saying, once again, cannot be correct in line 3 of choice B, that's good, we'll keep that. C says must be false in the final line. So you see they're putting, in some cases, conclusion at the beginning, some cases at the end, but so far A, B, and C all match on this. And that's because it's not that impressive to be able to do this. We're just matching synonyms for false or incorrect, so they're not going to give us a whole lot for that, but they will probably give us something, which they do in D. They say, this definition is unfortunate in lines 3 to 4. Unfortunate versus incorrect, those are not the same thing, so D is out on that basis alone. Then looking at E, it follows that Library of Alexandria was not the first in the world. I say kind of add to that one because you could say it cannot be the case that the library was first. On the other hand, this is not really a hypothesis or a theory, so I'm kind of iffy on that, but I would certainly eliminate D. But then overall, we have this other thing going on, which is the method of reasoning. The idea of infinity is impossible. Therefore, any claim based upon infinity is false. And so I would just run through the choices, seeing Does something better match that idea of infinity, something requiring infinite regress or going back and back and back, therefore making a hypothesis to be false, suggesting a hypothesis is false overall? I think A starts to look okay, but then they talk about something being highly unlikely, which we don't have any match for in the stimulus. So I would eliminate A on that basis. B talks about multiple things being correct. We don't have any idea of multiples in the stimulus. But C talks about precedence going back further than that. But then the question is, of course, what's the starting point? There has to be some starting point. So they conclude, therefore, that this particular theory, again, theory matching hypothesis in the stimulus being false, is a great match. And then looking at E, just to be thorough here, they're concluding that something is not the first because we know for a fact there were previous ones before that. So E actually seems valid to me on an initial quick read. Looking at it a little more closely here, I guess the question for E is how you define the word library. Is it a collection or is it technically a library? That's open to debate, of course, but regardless, it is not the same as this. So E is out, C is our answer. Tricky question. I think this would have been, once again, a good candidate to skip and come back to if you were thrown off initially just by the topic of the stimulus here. It's reminding me kind of the mirrors passage from earlier with the whole mental thing, which typically is a little more abstract and tougher to get a handle on. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.